If you've been stepping on the scale every morning for the past 20 years, watching those numbers climb despite your best efforts, you might be tracking the wrong thing entirely. The number on your bathroom scale has been treated as the ultimate health metric for decades, but something fundamental shifted in how medical science views body composition, and most people are still measuring their health using outdated standards. By the time you finish reading this, you'll understand why two people at the same weight can have completely different health outcomes, and why your muscle mass might be the most important number you're not tracking. The scale doesn't tell you the whole story. It can't distinguish between fat, muscle, bone, and water. A person who weighs 180 pounds with 30% body fat faces entirely different health risks than someone who weighs 180 pounds with 15% body fat and significantly more muscle mass. Yet for generations, doctors relied primarily on body mass index, a calculation based solely on height and weight that was invented in the 1830s by a Belgian mathematician who explicitly stated it should not be used for individual health assessment. BMI categorizes muscular athletes as overweight and fails to identify metabolically unhealthy individuals who fall within normal weight ranges. The medical community has known about these limitations for years, but the momentum toward better metrics has accelerated dramatically. Recent research has crystallized around a condition called sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle mass and strength. After age 30, adults lose between 3% to 8% of their muscle mass per decade, and this rate accelerates after age 60. This isn't just about looking toned or fitting into smaller clothes. Muscle mass directly correlates with metabolic health, bone density, immune function, insulin sensitivity, and longevity. Studies published in recent years have shown that low muscle mass is a stronger predictor of mortality than BMI in older adults. One comprehensive study following over 3,600 older adults found that those in the lowest quartile of muscle mass had more than double the mortality risk compared to those in the highest quartile, regardless of their total body weight. The shift in medical thinking comes from understanding what muscle actually does beyond movement. Your muscles are metabolic organs. They're not just there to lift groceries or climb stairs. Muscle tissue actively burns calories even when you're sitting still, accounting for a significant portion of your resting metabolic rate. More importantly, muscles act as a glucose disposal system. When you have adequate muscle mass, your body handles blood sugar more efficiently, reducing diabetes risk. Muscle tissue also produces proteins called myokines that have anti-inflammatory effects throughout your body, protecting against chronic diseases including cardiovascular disease, certain cancers, and neurodegenerative conditions. Think of your muscle mass as a metabolic reserve account. When you face illness, injury, or surgery, your body draws on this reserve. People with low muscle mass entering medical procedures have worse outcomes, longer hospital stays, and higher complication rates. During recovery from illness, your body breaks down muscle tissue to fuel healing processes. If you don't have much muscle to begin with, this becomes dangerous quickly. This is why frailty, which is fundamentally about muscle loss, is such a critical concern in aging populations. The traditional approach to health focused on weight loss through calorie restriction. Cut your calories, watch the scale number drop, and assume you're getting healthier. But significant portions of that weight loss often came from muscle tissue, especially when people followed very low-calorie diets without adequate protein or resistance training. Someone might successfully lose 30 pounds and actually become metabolically worse off because they lost muscle along with fat. Their metabolic rate decreased, their insulin sensitivity potentially worsened, and they became more vulnerable to the exact health conditions they were trying to prevent. This is where modern understanding diverges sharply from old diet culture. The goal isn't to weigh less. The goal is to have an optimal body composition with sufficient muscle mass and lower fat mass, particularly visceral fat that accumulates around organs. A person might maintain the same weight or even gain weight while dramatically improving their health by building muscle and reducing fat. This is why the scale can be actively misleading during a genuine health improvement journey. Consider what happens when you build muscle through resistance training and adequate protein intake. Your resting metabolic rate increases because muscle tissue requires energy to maintain. Your insulin sensitivity improves as your muscles become better at pulling glucose from your bloodstream. Your bone density increases because resistance exercise signals your bones to become stronger. Your balance and coordination improve, reducing fall risk. Your ability to perform daily activities remains intact as you age. These benefits compound over time in ways that simple weight loss never could. The evidence supporting muscle-focused health metrics has reached critical mass in medical literature. Major health organizations have begun updating their guidelines to emphasize body composition over simple weight measurements. The European Working Group on Sarcopenia in older people released updated criteria for diagnosing and treating muscle loss. The American Association of Clinical Endocrinology revised their guidelines to emphasize body composition assessment. Insurance companies have started covering body composition testing because the data shows it predicts health outcomes more accurately than BMI. Technology has made body composition tracking more accessible than ever before. While the most accurate methods like DEXA scans remain clinical tools, consumer devices using bioelectrical impedance analysis have become reasonably reliable for tracking changes over time. Smart scales that measure body fat percentage, muscle mass, and other metrics now cost less than a month of gym membership. Healthcare providers increasingly have handheld devices that can assess muscle mass and fat distribution during routine appointments. But here's what most people miss. You can't improve what you don't measure. If you only track total weight, you'll make decisions optimized for weight loss rather than body composition improvement. You might choose excessive cardio over strength training because it burns more calories per session. You might restrict protein to lower calories, exactly the opposite of what builds and maintains muscle. You might celebrate losing 15 pounds without realizing that 8 of those pounds were muscle tissue. The practical implications of this shift are profound, especially for people over 40. The standard advice of eat less, move more, fails to address muscle preservation. A better framework focuses on 3 pillars: adequate protein intake distributed throughout the day, progressive resistance training at least twice per week, and sufficient overall nutrition to support muscle maintenance. This often means eating more, not less, especially protein. Research indicates that older adults need substantially more protein than younger people to maintain muscle mass, somewhere between 1.2 to 2.0 grams per kilogram of body weight daily depending on activity level and health status. Resistance training doesn't mean you need to become a bodybuilder or spend hours in a gym. It means challenging your muscles against resistance 2 to 3 times per week. This could be body weight exercises, resistance bands, free weights, or machines. The key is progressive overload, gradually increasing the challenge to your muscles over time. Studies show that even people in their 80s and 90s can build significant muscle mass through appropriate resistance training. It's never too late to start, though starting earlier provides compounding benefits. The metabolic advantages of muscle mass become even more critical as we age. After age 50, the risk of developing metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease increases substantially. These conditions are deeply connected to body composition. Visceral fat produces inflammatory compounds that contribute to insulin resistance and cardiovascular problems. Muscle mass does the opposite, improving insulin sensitivity and producing anti-inflammatory signals. The ratio between your muscle mass and fat mass might be the most important predictor of your metabolic health. There's also a cognitive connection that surprises many people. Emerging research links muscle mass to brain health and cognitive function. The mechanisms aren't fully understood, but the correlations are strong. People who maintain muscle mass as they age show lower rates of cognitive decline and dementia. This might relate to the growth factors and proteins that muscles produce, which appear to have neuroprotective effects. It might also connect to the fact that people who maintain muscle mass tend to remain more physically active, and physical activity independently protects brain health. For women, The muscle mass question becomes particularly important around menopause. The hormonal changes during menopause accelerate muscle loss and promote fat accumulation, especially around the midsection. Many women notice they can't maintain their weight using strategies that worked for decades. This isn't failure or lack of willpower, it's a fundamental shift in body composition driven by hormonal changes. The solution isn't to eat less and exercise more in the traditional sense. It's to prioritize muscle maintenance through resistance training and adequate protein, which helps counteract the metabolic changes of menopause. The psychological shift required here can be challenging. We've been conditioned to chase lower numbers on the scale, to celebrate weight loss regardless of composition, to fear gaining weight even when that weight is healthy muscle tissue. Someone following a muscle-focused approach might see their weight stay the same or even increase slightly while their body composition dramatically improves. Their clothes fit better, their energy increases, their health markers improve, but the scale doesn't validate this progress. This requires letting go of deeply ingrained beliefs about what health looks like. Consider the practical example of two 60-year-old women, both 5'5" and 160 pounds. According to BMI, they're both slightly overweight with identical health risks, but one has 30% body fat and maintains muscle mass through regular strength training and adequate protein intake. The other has 40% body fat and has been losing muscle mass through repeated cycles of restrictive dieting and minimal resistance exercise. Their actual health status is dramatically different. The first woman has better blood sugar control, higher metabolic rate, greater bone density, lower inflammation markers, and significantly better functional capacity. She can carry her groceries, play with grandchildren, travel comfortably, and maintain independence. The second faces increased risks of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, and functional limitations despite having the same BMI. The good news is that muscle responds to training at any age. Unlike some aspects of health that become increasingly difficult to modify as we age, muscle mass can be built and maintained through appropriate exercise and nutrition well into advanced age. The research on this is remarkably consistent. Studies with participants in their 70s, 80s, and even 90s show significant muscle mass and strength gains from resistance training programs. It's not too late, no matter where you're starting from. This doesn't mean weight is completely irrelevant. Excess body fat, particularly visceral fat, remains a significant health concern. The point is that weight alone doesn't tell you what you need to know. A comprehensive view of health requires understanding your body composition. What percentage of your weight is muscle? What percentage is fat? Where is that fat distributed? These questions provide actionable information that total weight simply cannot. The medical community's embrace of body composition metrics represents recognition that one-size-fits-all approaches to health assessment were never adequate. Two people with the same BMI can have vastly different health trajectories based on their underlying body composition. The person with more muscle mass and less fat, particularly less visceral fat, will likely live longer, remain independent longer, and spend fewer years dealing with chronic disease. These aren't minor differences. They fundamentally alter quality of life and longevity. As you think about your own health journey, consider whether you've been chasing the right metrics. If you've been frustrated by the number on the scale despite making healthy choices, you might be measuring the wrong thing. If you've lost weight through restrictive dieting but feel weaker and more tired, you might have lost muscle you needed to keep. If you're approaching or past middle age and haven't prioritized resistance training, you might be allowing preventable muscle loss that will affect every aspect of your future health. The path forward isn't complicated, though it requires consistency. Prioritize protein at every meal, aiming for at least 25-30 grams per meal if you're older than 40. Engage in resistance training at least twice per week, focusing on major muscle groups and gradually increasing the challenge. Get adequate sleep, which is crucial for muscle recovery and maintenance. Manage stress, which can promote muscle breakdown through elevated cortisol. Stay active throughout the day, not just during dedicated exercise sessions. Your muscle mass represents your metabolic health, your functional capacity, your resilience against disease and injury, and your potential for maintaining independence as you age. These outcomes matter far more than the number on your scale. The shift toward body composition metrics isn't just academic progress. It's a fundamental rethinking of what health actually means and how we measure it. The question isn't whether you weigh less than you did last year. The question is whether you're stronger, more capable, and metabolically healthier. Those are the metrics that determine how you'll experience the decades ahead.